everyone. So my name is Amel Hussein. I'm going to be doing an awesome talk on the modern web platform. So everyone should sit down. Folks in the hallway, please. Can we pressure everyone that's out there? We're going to yell 1, 2, 3, talk starting, okay? 1, 2, 3, talk starting. All right, great. All right, so can everybody see the screen okay? You guys are going to have to let me know if something happens with the connection. The wires seem to be a little finicky. Okay, great. All right, so hi everyone. Gonna get started?
Yes,
all
please.
Right.
You want me to introduce you or self-intro?
I can self-intro.
Self-intro. Amal's the best. She's visiting us all the way from Massachusetts.
All right, hi everyone. So my name is Amel Hussein. I'm from Boston. I'm really excited to be here and support Eva's awesome event and meet you guys here in the Bronx. So a little bit about me. So I'm a senior software engineer. I work at Boku. My official title is Senior Open Web Engineer. Boku. Sorry, this is really trying.
You good?
Okay, I need to be intimate with the mic.
Okay.
All
We have
right.
another one on the other side. You like that one better?
Okay, I'll try. I'll stick with this one. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm cutting out. Anyway, so I work at Boku. We work on the open web platform. We're consultants that work with browser engines. So we work with Google, Microsoft, Mozilla on JavaScript parsing engines. We work on their conformance testing for web standards and JavaScript language features. And we work on a lot of really cool stuff that I'm happy to talk to you about. And I also have some stickers today. So of Bob, he's like a famous rooster there that you see. So come find me if you want a sticker. So I've been working on full stack JavaScript for the past 5 years. These days I work a lot on unit testing and infrastructure. I'm actually doing a unit testing workshop today. Do I need the mic? Is it better without? I feel like it's better without the mic.
It's up to you. Can you hear her?
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm gonna skip the mic because this is really annoying. So I live and work in the best city, Boston. I will say that I was born in New York City though, so I am technically a New Yorker first. And I'm also a co-host for a really popular podcast called the Web Platform Podcast. It's a podcast that gets like over 20,000 hits a month. So you guys should all check it out. We talk about a lot of different topics from JavaScript libraries to new web primitives, lots of cool stuff. So I'm also, the reason I'm here, I know Eva through the GDG community. I'm the lead organizer for GDG Cambridge, and so I love GDG, and I'm really familiar with what everything is doing. All right, so I'm here to talk to you guys today about the web platform, which is really, it's the one platform that's open, it's everywhere, the web is discoverable. It accesses, it democratizes access to information, and primarily, the web is like the one platform that we all have that's always, that's accessible regardless of what platform you're on, right? So you can get onto the web from, a Linux machine using Firefox, or a Windows machine using Chrome, or an iPhone using Firefox. These days you can even use Edge on Macs, right? because they've deployed Edge. So as a binary that's compatible with Linux now. So so the web is this like incredible thing that really is like, I think, the greatest thing we've ever done as a human race. And it's the one platform we have that is open, meaning that there's no barriers to who can let us who can publish a website, right? For example, if you're an iOS developer or an Android developer, you guys know you have two gods, God of Google, God of Apple, right? You work really hard on building your app for months, and you try to deploy your app to the App Store, and all of a sudden it gets rejected, right? And you have no real say or control in that. And so the web is completely open. Anybody can put content on the web. and the web's also always up to date, right? So how many of you guys own iPhones? All right, so how many of you guys have tried to open like an app that's was built for iOS 6 on your latest device? Have you? Is it functional? No. Right. So the web is always up to date. That's the other it's the little things that we take for granted that we don't think about too deeply. Right. So there's no updating the web. There's no release for the web. Right. The web is architected so that the packages of information that get distributed on the web are versioned and and that's how we do version control on the web. And most importantly, the web is built on W3C standards. Does anybody know what the W3C is? All right, what's W3C?
These guys in Geneva.
Yeah, well, Geneva, right.
They all have a beard.
Standards, right. Standards, beards, all bearded men in Geneva. Now, the W3C is a World Wide Web consortia. It's a consortium for how web standards get developed. So how do web APIs become a thing? How does service worker become a thing? It's through many years of hard work and lots of people from all around the world, corporate, nonprofit, government, coming together and deciding on what's going to be supported for the web. And so web is built on standards. And so the web is actually a little less than 30 years old, and we've had this massive explosion, evolution of devices that we support for the web, right? So we have really crappy desktops when I was in high school, those gigantic machines, to now, we have more access in our pockets than we did at any time in human history. And so with this explosion of, innovation with hardware, right, and how we package information on the web, the one thing that we've kind of forgotten to do is just architect our web applications to really be best suited for for these new devices, right? And so how many of you guys enjoy using the web on your mobile phone? Not that many. It's barely any hands up, right? And that's because we haven't really architected or designed mobile web apps to be usable on those to be usable on a tiny screen that's touch, right? Designers are they have, I don't know if you've ever walked into a design room or design shop, but there's these giant, designers have these giant $2,000 screens, and they're making these pixel perfect things. And the real thing they should be doing is they should buy a $50 screen that's I don't know, 15 inches or 13 inches, and then they should be using a low grade Android phone to actually develop and iterate on, because that's more reflective of usage in the wild, and it's more inclusive of most phones that are actually accessing the internet. And just to give you some metrics for why I said that, so there's more people coming online per minute now than there are, I think, maybe more people coming online more people have come online in the past 3 minutes than there are people in this room, right? So Brazil is a good example of that. They've had this exponential explosion of numbers. So if you can see here, in 2015, there were 72 million Brazilians who had access to the internet. And by 2020, that number is projected to go up to 116 million. And and today we're at around 95 million. And so, there's almost 20 million people that are going to be coming online in the next 4 years. And so you just do the math, divide that by the number of days, the number of days till 2020, the number of minutes, right? And it's about 20-something people coming online every minute in Brazil. And that's just Brazil, right? And so we have this whole new group of users that are coming online and using the web for the first time. And unlike you and I, they're not using this, right? They're not using this fancy MacBook. They're not using the fancy Pixel, Google Pixel or iPhones that we have. They're using $30 phones or less, and that's their primary access to the web, right? And that's their primary access to being able to use the internet. It's not the whole multi-device situation isn't a thing. Additionally, they are on data plans, right? And data, like mobile data, is currency in developing countries. It's Facebook updating, doing an update, like that's maybe like one person's salary for the month. Data is very expensive in developing countries, and it's expensive relative to the cost of living and what people are making. Any questions so far? Any thoughts? All right, so this is going to be Dwight. Dwight's our protagonist for the day, and myself and Dwight are both on the same page. We're really both a little frustrated around the state of mobile web. I'm not happy with it. I work on the web platform, like I said. I submit patches to WebKit. I most recently, submitted tests to, JavaScript parsing engines, right? So I mean, I as somebody who was a web developer and now works on the platform, I know that we can do better. And so my pitch to you today is that the people involved in the standards community have actually been working really hard on coming up with some really awesome APIs that will take our mobile web experiences and just make them so much better. And I hope by the end of this talk that we can make Dwight happy and me happy too. So like I said, I think browsers can make Dwight feel better, right? And so why are browsers so awesome? Like I said, they're a universal VM that allows us to connect to the web platform regardless of operating system. So that alone just makes browsers this really powerful gateway for kind of bringing a sense of uniformity to like a very chaotic hardware, software, operating system matrix. And so, like I said, we have all these new people coming online from emerging markets, but they're also their primary devices are their phones, right? And so you add that coupled with like in the Western world, everyone's got a phone, and more, the younger you are, the more likely you are to only use your phone to access the internet. And we had this like really critical kind of tipping point about 4 years ago, where more people were accessing the web on their mobile devices than on desktops, right? But we never really architected the web to be accessed on like a 3x5 screen, right? And so still a pretty frustrating experience. And so if you look at the like average like number of apps that a user downloads per month, if you like look at that number and then you just round it down, it actually rounds down to 0, right? And I think if you look at we can like test, like we can do a little like litmus test for this people in this room. How many of you guys like spend time downloading apps every month? Like how many apps? Okay, let's see. Do you download more than 2 apps a month? Updating. Yeah, updating doesn't count. Anybody downloading more than 2 apps a month? No, right? Okay, so we're already in the 1 range.
I do, but I cheat because I do game development, so I'm downloading games to see how they work.
Okay, you've got an excuse, not for work, for like actual like your own usage. So anybody downloading, like, does this number make sense for most people in this room? Yeah, right. So it's kind of hilarious actually. And so why are native apps so? I understand. Like my partner is actually an Android developer. He's going to be giving a great talk later today on Android MVP. And it's funny. Like we're both dating. I'm very team web. He's team mobile. And it's fine, nothing wrong with native mobile development, but what I can tell you is that like I'm sick of native like mobile developers giving like the web a bad rep. They're like, oh, whatever, like web on mobile is like so crappy. You can't do anything. You don't have access to Bluetooth. You don't have access to the device, right? So all these product teams around like different companies are always they're always like pitching for let's build a native app. Let's hire an entire iOS team. Let's hire an entire Android team. The reality is like most businesses in this country are actually small or medium, right? And like having like 2 disparate teams, 3 if you think about web, it's a little crazy, right? So what I want to pitch here is that like what if we could take this orange here is like what would be represented by native apps, and the blue is web apps. So what if we could take the capability, right, of native web apps, right? So we think of native as like the super powerful thing, so like close to the hardware, right? Yeah, but like whatever. What if we could take native capability and couple that with like the reach of the web, right? Because the web is something that, hey, we can get to the web from anywhere, but supposedly the rep is that web apps don't have the, they're not supercharged, right? And so what I like to say is that I, hope to kind of convince you throughout this presentation that we can actually take, the capability of native web apps and bring them to the mobile web experience. And guess what? Like, web is way better than native because it's got reach, right? You can get onto it from a Linux machine that's sitting in like, sub-Saharan Africa, like in a data center. You can get to it from your terminal. You can get to it from an iPhone, an iOS app. And so one of the like key initiatives behind bringing this type of supercharged power to the web is progressive web apps, right? And so maybe a lot of you have heard of this like buzzword, progressive web apps. How many of you guys have heard of progressive web apps? All right, so a decent number still haven't heard of them. So progressive web apps, it's kind of like a manifesto. So think about it as like a guideline for how you would build for the mobile web, right? So remember where I said that, hey, we've done a great job of building mobile webs for like hardwired desktop devices, but we've done a really crappy job of like small touchscreen that has like sort of okay Wi-Fi most of the time-ish, right? I don't know about you guys, but I live in Boston and I have what's called Li-Fi. It's not, you think you're online, but you're really not, It's just lying to you because you're just going from like 3G to 4G to 2G to no G, you're on the subway, right? And all of that, like if you average out like the experience, like your connectivity, right? You go from 4 to 2 to no, it like averages out to like 2.5G, right? And that's me. I live in one of the most advanced cities in the world. And so after New York, okay, we'll just add that. New York first, always. So progressive web apps, it's a manifesto, it's a set of guidelines for how you as web developers and hopefully as future recovering native mobile web developers can develop web apps, right? So they're supposed to be fast, which means that like regardless of like how slow a network connection is or how memory like limited devices, that it should be a fast experience, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. That they're integrated, so that you're using APIs that integrate with the browsers, with the native OS's APIs, and that they're reliable, meaning that they're available offline, right? So one of the most crappy things about mobile web is like, you hit refresh, you're on the train, and boom, there it goes, right? Even though the images and everything is cached, like, it's not smart enough to like know when you hit refresh, like it'll show you the dyno, we're offline, and there you go, like you're SOL, right? And so they're offline, they're fast, they're integrated, and most of all, they're also engaging, right? And you can utilize push notifications, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So most modern web experiences, like in order for you to leverage a lot of these modern web APIs that we're going to discuss, that you are absolutely required to be on HTTPS, right? And so most of you are I guess let's look at how many of you are students in the room? All right. So we have lots of good minds to influence. How many professionals in the room? All right. Okay, so it's like a half-half. If you're not on HTTPS, even when you're developing locally, like you should start now, right? And so HTTPS is like really easy to do now, and Chrome actually, the latest version of Chrome actually is, you see this little green lock that we are all used to looking for? They're actually phasing that out, right? Because they're distinguishing the difference between secure and safe, and there's so basically encrypted doesn't necessarily mean safe all the time, and so this is going to be phased out, and already on the latest versions of Chrome, if you're on a form, even if the form just asks for your name or your favorite color, it's going to, by default, like this is going to change to saying not secure. So all of you should definitely be on HTTPS, and Let's Encrypt is a free service that lets you set up SSL certs, and they have directions, like regardless of where you're hosting. It's pretty easy. So the first web primitive that we're going to talk about is service worker. And so service workers are this like amazing new web primitive that lets you basically leverage caching, tapping into the native OS with push notifications, lets you do a lot of computation off the main thread, so your user experiences it faster. And there's an awesome library called Workbox, Workbox.js actually, that's been developed by Google developers. It's open source, and it's lets you very easily work with service workers in a sane way. So service workers are, I'm happy to say, definitely available on all modern browsers. In Safari, a couple months ago, it just started to go into development. So all the features aren't there in Safari, but they will be soon. And for those of you who have to support older browsers, right, like you can use this type of feature detection here in order to very easily, progressively, add support in for service workers inside of your applications, right? So I'm always hearing from teams, oh, I have to support IE, I have to do this, you know, and it's like, well, it's fine, but don't let IE hold your web experiences back. You know, feature detection is totally normal. It's totally normal to, you know, have logic in your code, and you can, you know, just do this in order to do that. And if you use Workbox, they actually do this under the hood for you, so you don't even have to worry about that. So let's look at how a service worker works. It's funny, right? So normally when you're on the web, right, you're like, okay, I'm surfing the web, I'm like making a request to a server, great, like data comes back, it's like this two-way information flow. But when you're offline, you know, you get this like ugly dino, right, and it's not fun. And so what service workers allow you to do is basically like when you make a request, you can start caching requests, and you can very easily manage your caching strategies based on routes, APIs, etc. So you basically make a request, you can choose to cache what comes back. Let's say you have a JSON payload that comes back, or a bunch of images that you want to cache that come back. And so the next time your user makes the request, you can either get it from the cache, or you can like have them go to the web server, right? So it's basically a proxy that sits in the middle. And so, so you're basically able to say, hey, user like wants to go here, but oh, I detect that they're offline now, so we're gonna just have them go to the cache. Or even if they're not offline, in order to save their data, right, you can basically say, hey, user, this cache has not been invalidated yet, so I'm just gonna like, there's no, you know, it's the same payload, hasn't been invalidated. I'm gonna just pull from cache now because, you know, nothing's changed, right? And so you're doing like your user a favor because like their battery doesn't have to get drained by like making a request that they don't need unnecessarily, right? You're saving some trees because you're using less resources, so that's great. And most of all, you're giving your user a fast experience. You know, like how many of you guys have seen things pull from cache, right? So it's just this amazing thing, and service worker is just like, it's one of the most powerful primitives that we've added to the web platform, and when you use it, it like makes you feel like you're God in the browser because you can just make your you control what your user experience is, and it's incredible. We have a question.
Work on it. They're pretty much your best friend.
They're best friend,
They're
yes.
amazing, and I was lucky enough. I'm certified in web development by Google. They're pretty much like use a service worker always because
By
it will
default.
save you so much effort later.
It will, and I mean, and like I said earlier, Workbox.js, for those of you who want to grab like a photo of this, like it makes it even easier. You don't even have to create your own caching logic or caching strategies. They have great things that work with Webpack. It's super easy and awesome. And so just to reiterate, those service workers only work on the second load, right? Because you're like the first time your user comes to your site, the service worker gets registered, and you know, that's when the caching begins. So it's the second load and the third load and so forth that you'll get to actually benefit from the performance gains of using a service worker. We had a question there or comment?
I just wanted to make a comment that Google put their money where their mouth is, and now Google search uses service workers. They announced that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're big stuff.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't hear, she said that Google's search engine, like actually Google.com last month, started to use service workers. I think it was around the time of I/O that they did that. So that's huge, right? And just to also make sure that you guys are aware, like if it's not clear already, service workers is an open web standard. It's not a Google technology. This is like a web primitive. This is something that every single browser engine was a part of deciding, for the web. So just to make you aware, Google was just like very much like evangelizing it. And fun fact, my coworker Mike Pacini wrote all of the web platform tests for Service Worker, and so because it's like on this open source project called Web Platform Tests. You can come talk to me about it later. And because the tests were there and they were open source, and Google actually paid us to do that. When the folks at Apple decided, hey, we're gonna finally give in to the pressure, like we're gonna be the last browser to start developing, they were able to develop faster because the tests were there in open source. So like fun fact, like I am like indirectly connected to like the speed of service workers like on Safari development. All right, so one of the really cool things with the service worker, along with something called a web manifest, right? So it's this JSON file that you can add to like the root of your project. So if browsers detect that, hey, there's a service worker, and hey, this user is really engaged with this site, and this engagement index is something that's like an algorithm that like is determined by the browser, you get this little notification that says, hey, do you want to add this to home screen? And so what happens when you add to home screen is, instead of seeing this like ugly like this thing here, it just goes from being an icon on your phone, and when you open it, it's like this full screen, beautiful, immersive experience. And so along with once you have a progressive web app, you're able to also just like use it's actually not a requirement that progressive web, as long as you have HTTPS, you're able to tap into like web payment APIs that are native to the phone's OS, right? So you can get a checkout flow that looks like this, that like links into Android Pay, which is great. And then if you have music playing or a video playing, and your screen's locked, right? If you're using the new media API, you're able to it feels like just like a native device. Like you're able to control it from the user's home screen without actually being visible on the browser. And lastly, I think one of the most exciting things for browsers, but also the most annoying as users, is push notifications, right? So now actually you can send push notifications from a browser, which is really exciting, but in my opinion, like the web spec should have been a little bit more strict, because I don't think they should have allowed users to, for sites to just like request to send a push notification like as soon as a user arrives, right? So for those of you who are playing around with push notifications, you want to make sure that you're asking the user, hey, can I send you a push notification, when it's contextual and appropriate, right? Because otherwise they're just going to say no, and as soon as the user says no, you're on the block list, and they have to like manually go and remove you from the block list, and most users are not going to do that. So you kind of have one shot to ask a user, hey, is it okay for me to send you push notifications? When they say yes, you're able to do things like this, right? And you're able to like give the push notification a title, give it some message. You can actually build in your own custom icon, and the push notification, like the actual UI, it's styled by the OS, right? So if on iPhones, it looks like whatever a native iPhone push notification would look like. On Android, it looks like Android. On Mac OS, it looks like a native thing. So just to recap, so progressive web apps are immersive, right? You can do full screen theming. You can add to home screen, using push notifications, powered by service workers. You can also get offline. And the key word here is that progressive web apps are progressive, meaning that like they're, depending on what features a browser supports, right? A browser might not support push notifications, for example. You don't have to do it, right? So you can use feature detection like I showed you with those if blocks in order to leverage them. So we're going to talk about some other web APIs. So this is actually one of my favorite ones, because this solves a really big problem for the web. It's really annoying to share information from your browser to like your native apps. And so the Web Share API is super simple, beautiful API. You guys will see it in just a second. And it allows you to basically send data in, through a standard API contract to any like native app that's on the device. So you're basically using the same way native apps receive data. You're able to send something from a browser to any app that you want, which is really nice. And it's a super, super simple API, right? So if Navigator, like everything's on the Navigator object, so if Navigator share, right, then like send with, this title, this text, this URL, and this is obviously asynchronous, right? So it returns a promise, and when that promise is resolved, you can do whatever you want. And if there's an error, you can also like handle that pretty easily. So this is actually experimental, a little asterisk. Experiment meaning it's still in the proposal stages, but it is implemented in Chrome and I think in Firefox. It's called Device Memory Header API, and this is really powerful because it allows you to understand what type of phone and what type of device you're working with, right? So if your user has a $30 Android phone, it's very different. It has very different processing power than like a Pixel 2 XL, right? And so you're able to basically figure out what memory they have. And for security reasons, like they don't tell you the exact amount of memory on the device. It's a set of 8 numbers, right? So it's starting with 0.5. So if you get 0.5, you can assume that's like a really low grade device. It goes all the way up to 8, and if you get 8, you can assume like, hey, this person is like probably on like an actual like chunky device, right? So, what can you do when you know how much memory you're working with? Like, can you guys tell me? Give me some examples. Yeah.
Maybe not render any animations.
Yeah, maybe not render any animations. What else? Maybe not send them like 100 million KB worth of JavaScript, Maybe not send them like the high-res image, right? So you can basically tailor your experience to whatever would be considered a good or acceptable experience for that device, right? So it's super, super powerful and super inclusive. So for me, this is actually one of the most inclusive APIs, I think, because it really takes into account all the phones that are in the Android ecosystem that are used around the world, in China and in many parts of Africa and in many parts of South America. So this is like a really important one, guys, and I hope to see more things like this as we progress. So this is also another favorite of mine, the Network Information API. So this basically allows you to say, hey, what are you on? Are you on Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 2G? And you're able to, like on the bottom, you can see here, you can add an event listener, right? Which means that, hey, for Amel, I'm an urban commuter, I'm going from 4G to Wi-Fi to 3G to no G. Like you basically can get a notification for when your user changes status, right? Oh, your user's now offline, your user's now on a faster connection speed. So then maybe you can do some preloading or pre-caching in the background when they're on Wi-Fi. When they're back on 3G, you don't do any like prefetching or anything like that, right? So again, it allows you to kind of create this tailored experience, which is like really awesome and very exciting. Any questions about this? These two APIs? Yeah.
Does the memory capability, that also affects how much the server can hold and caching information as well, right?
Yes, yeah. So that's a great question. So they said the memory information likely also affects how much the service worker can cache on device, right? And that's absolutely true, right? So again, like it just gives you another metric and another data point to kind of tailor your logic. Any questions? Any more questions? Thoughts? No. This is awesome, right? Yeah, super dope, right? I agree. People at W3C are doing good work. Takes a long time though. So how many of you guys have heard of Johnny 5? Johnny 5 is alive? Yeah, all right. So fun fact, my boss at Boku created this library. This was developed at Boku, my company, and this is like just one of the many open source projects that we've created. Like Grunt, like the first JavaScript task runner came out of my company too. And so Johnny 5 is like the driver for basically JavaScript IoT. Like JavaScript IoT wouldn't be a thing without this library. And Rick Waldron, my manager, had submitted a proposal which took a long time to get through to the W3C called generic web sensor APIs. And so and we'll see that in just a second. So the generic web sensor API basically gives browsers a standard way, like it designed like a standard way for browsers to like collect sensor data and relay that to web developers, right? Which is so important because we're getting so many new types of sensors. You know, it would be crazy for like there to be this, you know, every new sensor has to go through the W3C proposal, which takes years because like we can't break the web, and it takes a long time to develop a web standard because it needs to be vetted, and there needs to be consensus, you know, and so the generic web sensor API basically provides a very easily extensible interface that lets browser vendors start to support new types of sensors, and we'll see that in just a second. So super beautiful, super clean API here. So we can see here, this is the orientation sensor that we're tapping into, right? So we just initialize, this is like inside the browser, obviously. So we initialize the sensor, and then, you know, there's an on-reading API and an on-error API, and then we just start it, right? So it's as simple as that. Initialize, when you're reading it, it sends back data with timestamps, and then you know, if there's an error event, you're able to handle that, and then you know you just start it. It's like super simple. And just to give you an example of the stuff that you can do in a browser now, right? Like, you know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, this would have just been like, no, you can't do this in a browser. You know, like you can't build a JavaScript, you can't build like a high performance game that has to do with sensors in the browser, right? And now, like you can, right? Because you're able to get that like high precision reading back. So this is really exciting because if you combine this type of sensor reading with things like WASM, right? Like, which is WebAssembly, you know, where you're able to, you know, deliver really high performance graphics to the web. You know, so you can, like, like the possibilities are just like infinite. And so for those of you who are very into motion and sensors, I'd highly recommend taking a look and reading this W3C guide to motion and sensors. That came out with this API to help developers understand a little bit more about it. It's a little over my head personally, but you know.
Every device is different.
Yeah, every device is different, but there's a generic interface on how to read that read the sensor data now. So anyway, so this one is a cool one, but a little creepy, little more towards the surveillance side, but there's lots of actually good uses for this. But the shape detection API, right? So essentially, the shape detection API lets you detect all kinds of shapes, right? It's primarily used for barcodes, faces, you know, OCR, which is like optical character recognition, right? Like you're able to like read a text, right? Take a photo of something, read the text, and have the text converted into, you know, using a natural language processor, maybe have the text converted into something. But it's a really cool API, and you're able to now do this from your browser because you know, you use the media API to take a photo, and then your browser can do this type of processing right away, which is pretty cool. And so, just to look at how this works, if you want to use the face detector API, you know, or the text or barcode, you just initialize them, right? And everything is asynchronous. So once that promise resolves, right? So you're able to just read the buffer that gets returned from that. It's pretty straightforward. Any questions about this? No? Yes.
The way you can develop it is pretty much it. If you think you can do it, you can probably do it now. You just have to be creative and use all these amazing tools that you have and do something amazing.
Yes, agreed. Yes, agreed. Like the the world is your canvas or something. The browser is your canvas. You know. Yeah, agreed. So I think Dwight's still a little disappointed, though, to be honest. And if we like take a step back I'll tell you why, because like I feel like Dwight is me right now, and I'll talk for Dwight. I'll tell you why I'm still disappointed. Because the hardest part of using the mobile web for me is the fact that I have to use my phone, you know? And so, like, what if the web was just like this ephemeral thing, right? That was just everywhere, and like I wouldn't have to do this, you know, or like if I'm like on a train or like I'm somewhere and I'm like, crap, where's my phone? I need to use the web. Like, it's just this annoying thing, right? So I'm looking forward to a future where, you know, the web will be a bit more ephemeral and it'll be in the thing space in a way that's like secure and better integrated with our day-to-day lives, which is why I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about one aspect of the ephemeral web, which is the physical web. So how many of you guys have heard of the physical web? Yeah, a couple of you, one of you, two of you. All right, so the physical web is Bluetooth low energy supported web, right? And we'll get into what that is. So you see these little things that are beaming things, right? So that's a Bluetooth low energy beacon that's beaming data. So let's take a look at this video, and
I didn't know that it was referenced that way, because I was going to ask you, what about low energy Bluetooth?
Yeah.
Genuine interest in that.
Yeah. So let's take a look at this video. All right. So we have a parking meter, right? And God knows I hate parking meters. Just, you know, you never have a quarter or you never have the right thing. So you're now just walking up to the parking meter, saying, "Hey, it's me," and paying, and like you're done. Like, how beautiful was that, right? So no logging in, nothing. So there's a couple things that happen there, and we can watch it again so everybody can pay attention. Walk up, and you see parking meter, a little notification on the device. And so now you're connected to that particular parking meter, adding time and paying, and you're done. All right, so let's walk through what just happened there. So user walked up to the parking meter. Parking meter has a Bluetooth device embedded inside of it, right? So this has a Bluetooth device, a Bluetooth low energy device, an iBeacon, and it's using the Eddystone standard, which actually Google was really heavily involved in standardizing. So like in the devices space, there's a lot of fragmentation and there's very little standardization, right? So when there's a standard for a way to interact with something in the IoT space, it's a big deal. And so Bluetooth low energy devices, iBeacons that follow the Eddystone protocol, it's like this golden standard now, you know, so that's using an Eddystone beacon. So then there's an Eddystone beacon embedded inside this that's broadcasting on a URL. So that's all it's doing. And these low energy Bluetooth devices, I think they only need to get charged like once every 5 years, and that number keeps going up, you know, so you can imagine it costs like less than 50 cents to get one, and then you don't need to charge it for 5 years. So it's a really like low maintenance. So once so that's broadcasting a URL, and so that's the physical web. And this phone has a browser that is physical web, that has physical web enabled, meaning that it's able to receive notifications from iBeacons. And so just in order to avoid the whole spamming thing, right? Because you can imagine, like, if everybody got an iBeacon and everyone's like hub all the time, there's a ton of spam and like no one. So the rule is you have to, like, the user has to interact with the phone. So the user has to go and see, okay, what beacons are around me? So the user has to initiate the search. And that search is indexed by this proxy, right? So every browser, like Chrome and Mozilla both support the physical web. Chrome and Mozilla both manage their own proxy servers. And that's in order to like manage security and spamming and all of that. So basically they index the top beacons that are in your location that they've deemed as secure, and you know, you're able to see that on your phone. So once you tap into it, you're now saying, okay, great, I'm going to now create this secured WebSocket session with URL gets broadcast here, WebSocket session gets created, you go to your proxy server, and it says, okay, great, yes, this is a verified connection. It pushes down to your phone. You make your payment, right? And like that, once the payment gets made, it gets pushed back to the Bluetooth device, and that says, okay, activate now. And it's just like as simple as that. And just to be clear, like this whole interaction with the proxy server and the message getting pushed back to the WebSocket, that's actually all just web. This is the only part that's the physical web, right? So this is the only part that's like not really like that's like kind of new. Everything else is just standard, web stuff. So it's pretty friggin' cool if you ask me. And most iBeacons are not this complicated. Most of them are. It's just like it's like you walk up to your toaster and your toaster like tells you, here's how to use me. Or you walk up to like a movie theater thing and you get the like listings of movies. It's not like this is like the most complex it would be because this is a two-way interaction. So is this clear to everyone? Yes? Isn't this cool?
It is.
Yeah, super cool. Amazing, right? It's like, oh my God, mind blown. So,
Spammers are going to get a hold of it.
well, I trust the that's why there's a proxy server there that like will, I think I'm trusting the proxy server will keep spammers out. Oh yeah, sure. All right, we have a question.
No, to that point, just to embellish for you.
Yeah.
Like certificate today, you have a certificate authority issuing them, right? Is there the equivalent like a beacon authority where you actually go someplace, register it, and or is that too far reaching?
Okay, so the question was
From a trust authority perspective.
Yeah, so the question he asked was there's a certificate authority that issues things for like SSL, right? Is there something of that equivalent for iBeacons? I think that's an awesome question, and I don't think there is. I think you just buy the beacon that has that Eddystone protocol. I don't think there is. I think that's what the proxy server does, but I know that they're really looking for a lot of feedback because this is all still in active development. So you should join that conversations. Like all of these conversations on web standards are open. You're all welcome to contribute to the discussion and ask questions and suggest ideas. You don't have to work at a big company and so I encourage you to like ask that question.
I'm going to.
Yeah,
After
great,
this, we're gonna figure out
fantastic.
where
I'm
all posted.
so happy to hear that. All right, so it's not a machine learning talk, but this is something that I'm personally interested in, like being able to now do machine learning in the browser. So TensorFlow.js was recently announced, and you're able to basically train in the browser. You're able to store models on the user's device, through the browser in a very secure way. And I know there's a TensorFlow workshop here today, so I would encourage all of you to go to that. But basically, so you look at all of these awesome web APIs that let you interact with the device in a cool way. You look at machine learning that you can now do on the browser. Like, what is there left? Like, do we really need native devices anymore? I don't know. I mean, I would just hire a bunch of web developers and like retrain your Android engineers, And so I think Dwight's happy. I'm happy. We're all excited. And so now we're going to just, to wrap up, how do you get started with all this? Like, how do you start using all these cool features and all these awesome APIs? Well, so you can take like the startup approach, like, like tech bro, like, yeah, we're just going to like scratch our like production app that uses like, is used by like 20,000 people. We're just going to make a new one. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend like, adding single features in progressively, right? So there's this really great article by Martin Fowler. I should have linked it here. It's on like refactoring your legacy applications. And the whole pattern is to like strangle it like module by module, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. Like I see teams trying to always like hold production for 3 months. We're just gonna refactor this app. Don't worry, our customers will like the new one better. And nope, that's like actually really not good. So refactoring while still pushing to production and like incrementally driving value for your customers is totally the way I would recommend going. You know, and so you're able to very easily like add in just add in a web manifest, right? Add in workbox. Just like start caching your main routes, see how that goes, right? And so you're able to just progressively refactor your app while still driving value. And so I'll give you a minute to read this, but I'm sick of teams like saying, hey, don't let like we have to support IE or we have to support this. Like, so I don't want you IE to keep holding your web experiences back, right? Like I showed you, you can use feature detection, and for CSS, you can use things like ad supports, you know, in order to like gracefully just use newer CSS, right? So if you want to use CSS grid, you know, you can use like ad supports. If CSS grid is supported, then use CSS browser. Please don't load in like this 500 KB of like Bootstrap, right? So you can start using native web primitives progressively. And so did everybody finish reading this? It's pretty funny, right? Yeah. So, all right, so how do you get started? So as developers, like there's easy ways for you guys to get involved with all of these browsers and preview the latest versions of all of these browsers. I don't have time to get into all of them, but the main takeaway I'd like for you to know about is Chrome has the coolest developer preview experience. So you can basically, so some of the features that we talked about today might only be available behind a flag, like for example, physical web, right? You can basically go to Chrome and say, hey Chrome, I am like lehmancollege.com. I want to sign up for an origin trial for physical web. And then they say, yes, you get a token. And so every time now your users come to lehmancollege.com on Chrome, they automatically get physical web turned on. So they don't have to go and turn the flag on, you know what I mean? And so what this means is like you as an engineer, you get to actually like use these APIs early. You get to be part of the design and development process. You get to give them feedback and say, hey, this works, this doesn't work. And you get to test things out in the wild, and you can do it in a safe way. You know, if you want, you can do some A/B testing with this. It's pretty cool. And these other browsers, I think you guys everybody knows these browsers, yes? No? All right, so does everybody know these browsers? All right, so I want everyone to get these browsers on their phone, like now, and for Brave on your desktop. So Brave is developed by Brendan Eich, who started Mozilla and also who's the founder of JavaScript. I'm actually interviewing Brendan Eich on July 19th for this .javascript, so there's a state of browser thing, and I'll see if Ava can share that with you guys. But Brendan Eich founded Mozilla, is now also the founder of Brave, which is this awesome browser that like basically fights ads, which actually slow down the entire web. And Brave gives you an ability to actually selectively opt in and share, and like you get to share the revenue with the people that are making money off of your browsing history. So it's awesome and super private, and you can do that in a way that's anonymized, so it's great. So I highly recommend you guys all check out Brave. And then Firefox Focus, which is just available on mobile. It's like my default browser on mobile. It's super private, like no tracking, no nothing, and they tell you like everything that's been blocked. It's super annoying, like every time, sometimes I have to like go to Chrome because I want to like log in, under my credentials. I can do that under Mozilla, but I don't want to. And when I go to Chrome on the same site, it's like 3 times slower because of the ads. And then I see all of the ads that were blocked, And so, anyways, highly recommend them. And then Beaker is something that I really recommend all of you check out. To be honest, like this is just an incredible browser that's peer-to-peer. They use Merkle trees in order to like let you access files offline, and this is actually like how the web should have been. Like the web should have been architected in this peer-to-peer way, but now we're all connecting to like Google, and Google connects us to everything, or we're connecting to Amazon. This allows us to like connect with our peers to access the web. It's incredible. So just check it out. And exciting times for the web. Browsers are really committed to like speed and security, and like we're winning as users. This is not like 15 years ago when we had to use jQuery so that like we could, you know, 10 years ago. And you know, and the web is the one platform where there's like no barrier to entry. It's inclusive to everyone that's coming online for the first time. And so make sure that like people in Brazil that are coming online for the first time like can enjoy your web experiences. You know? And so keep pushing the web platform forward. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks. Questions? Yeah.
What is the deal with Safari? Do they support the push notifications offline?
Yeah.
Or is it just
Yeah, so the question is, what's the deal with Safari? What's going on? So Safari's in active development. So Service Worker is available if you go to the console, you type navigator.serviceworker. It's just not fully baked, right? So it's in development. And you can access, if you really want to see the latest, greatest, you can go to GitHub, clone WebKit, build it, and you get the latest version. Or you can like download developer preview, but I would encourage you as engineers to go to GitHub and build WebKit. It's like awesome, and it takes an hour. So, yeah.
A few years ago, this talk would have been about HTML5.
Uh-huh.
What was the fate of HTML5?
Okay, so he asked a few years ago, this talk would have been about HTML5. What's the fate of HTML5? HTML5 is still there. It's still.
It's APIs now.
No. So this is, yeah, so there's a difference between, so there's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are the three primitives of the web. And then the web itself, browsers expose functionality, like APIs and how to interact with the browser, and that's what we're talking about today. So we weren't talking about markup, but HTML5 is extremely important and it's still used. Yeah, it's just not like new anymore. Maybe that's why we're not talking about it. Yeah.
It's going to solve all the problems.
Yeah. All right, a couple more questions. Nope. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys. That's my podcast. That's my Twitter handle.